Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Stacey Jones, and I serve as the Digital Preservation Librarian at the University of Arizona, and I'm also co-lead for the Digital POWRR project. POWRR is a long-standing workforce development and advocacy initiative that is focused on providing pragmatic digital preservation training for lower-resourced organizations. The title of my talk today is From Tools to Trust, a people-centered approach for digital preservation assessment. This talk is focused on a recently completed POWRR peer assessment program and how it led us to think differently about assessment. At the end of this program, what stood out the most wasn't infrastructure gaps, but the human dimensions, trust, connection, and care. When we think about assessment and digital preservation, the focus is almost always on infrastructure. Do you have the right storage? How often do you check fixity? Do you have policies and documentation? Are your workflows mature? And all of that is important, but it leaves out and hence devalues the human side of the work. The people doing digital preservation need confidence, support systems, and trust. Without those, no amount of infrastructure will make the work sustainable. So today, I want to invite you to think about assessment differently. What if we centered people as much as we do infrastructure? So today's talk details the lessons learned through the work of the POWRR Peer Assessment Program. This was an IMLS-funded initiative that ran from mid-2021 through mid-2025, specifically designed to support small and under-resourced organizations. The program brought participants together into 6 peer cohorts. Throughout the course of a year, they received training, engaged in structured assessment activities, and were paired with peer mentors who guided them through the process. We use familiar tools like the NDSA Levels of Preservation, the DPC's Rapid Assessment Model, and the NEDCC's Digital Assessment Framework. We chose a peer-based model very intentionally. Traditional assessments are often expert-driven and can feel intimidating, especially for smaller organizations with limited resources. By creating a structure where peers supported one another, we hope to shift the dynamic from being evaluated to learning together. That made the process more approachable and, as we found, more impactful. At the end of the project this past July, we produced several outputs, including a white paper, a volume of case studies authored by our program participants, and a new companion assessment framework we call Navigating Uncertainty, a Human-Centered Assessment Compass. One of the central questions throughout this project for us was, what difference does a peer-based assessment model actually make? The white paper documents some clear outcomes. First, participants consistently reported that their confidence and sense of self-efficacy grew over the course of the program. They also told us that they felt less isolated. Many came in feeling like they were the only person at their institution, or even sometimes in their region, responsible for digital preservation tasks. Working in a cohort helped break down that sense of being alone. One participant told us, "I've never had anyone else to talk to about this before. Just knowing I wasn't alone made the work feel possible." Comments like that really underscored just how powerful the human connection was in building confidence and reducing isolation. Participants walked away with clearer next steps for their organizations, even if those steps were small or incremental. And finally, they emphasized that peer support was not just nice to have, it was essential. The trust and solidarity built in the cohorts made the technical work more manageable. At the same time, participants raised issues that the existing assessment tools simply didn't account for. The first was hidden labor. A lot of the work required to keep digital preservation efforts alive was invisible. Things like fighting for staff time, building buy-in with administrators, or patching together informal support systems. The second was institutional dynamics. Whether an organization had leadership support or whether communication silos existed made a huge difference in what was actually possible, even more than infrastructure sometimes. And finally, participants noted that the assessment tools we used, while very valuable, didn't capture these relational or affective factors. They could tell you if your storage was redundant or your policies were documented, but they couldn't tell you whether your staff felt supported or whether emotional burnout was threatening overall sustainability. These gaps led us to ask, what would an assessment approach look like if it explicitly acknowledged the human side of the work? Traditional assessment models tend to emphasize checklists and compliance. Do you have this? Do you have that? Those are important questions, but they only tell you part of the story. What actually sustains digital preservation over time is often invisible in these tools. It's things like whether staff have support systems, whether communication and trust exist across the organization, whether the individuals doing the work are at risk of burnout, and whether the organizational culture values this labor in the first place. We needed a framework that could help surface and validate these factors alongside the technical ones. And that's what led us to develop Navigating Uncertainty, a human-centered assessment compass. So this is the Navigating Uncertainty framework. It was designed to serve as a companion to more technical tools like the NDSA levels. But instead of focusing on systems and workflows, it focuses on the human experience of doing stewardship work. The framework highlights 6 domains that came up repeatedly during the peer assessment program: sustainable resourcing, confidence and self-efficacy, support and belonging, institutional safety and validation, emotional resilience, and reflective practice and growth. Instead of maturity levels, we used navigational metaphors: run aground, adrift, charting a course, and true north. The idea is that people may feel steady in one area and completely adrift in another, and that's normal. This isn't a checklist or a ranking, it's a compass meant to help practitioners orient themselves, reflect, and identify where they need support. For example, someone who has run aground may be the only person responsible for all aspects of digital preservation at their institution, trying to juggle multiple roles and feeling like burnout is inevitable. By contrast, someone who is at the charting a course level might be in the process of finding their bearings. They've got growing confidence, some reliable support, and a clearer sense of direction. The range of navigational points helps normalize fluctuation within roles over time. The framework is also grounded in a body of literature that speaks to the need for people-centered approaches in digital preservation. Community archive scholars like Michelle Caswell, Marika Seafor, and Ricardo Ponzolin have emphasized care ethics and cultural humility, reminding us that preservation is relational work. Blumenthal and colleagues in a 2020 study found that many practitioners feel disempowered by institutional disconnects and a lack of long-term support. That resonates strongly with what our participants told us. The DPC's 2024 Mental Health and Wellbeing Survey reported that nearly 70% of practitioners face unrealistic workloads and about 60% experience burnout. That's not a personal failing, it reflects systemic conditions. Stephen Abrams has also argued recently that current assessment practices put too much emphasis on technical process metrics and trustworthy infrastructures, while neglecting real outcomes for communities. His call for multivalent evaluation aligns with our focus on confidence, connection, and care. Finally, educational theory shaped our program's design. Scholars like Jane Villa and Stephen Brookfield emphasize psychological safety, reflection, and learner autonomy as keys to adult learning. And John Dewey's ideas of experiential learning and communities of practice remind us that peer dialogue and reflection aren't extras, they're central to building confidence and capacity. Together, these literatures converge on the same insight that assessment has to center people and not just infrastructure. So, how do we see this framework being used? First, it was designed as a companion to sit alongside established tools like the NDSA Levels or DPC RAM. So, where those tools may give you more of a picture of systems and infrastructure, this one helps surface the human conditions that sustain the work. The framework itself comes with several components. There's a key that helps explain the 6 aspects and the 4 navigational points to help practitioners orient themselves on the chart. But there's also more. We include a guide for using the tool in challenging workplaces and a parallel guide for using it in supportive workplaces. These resources offer tailored ideas for how to use the compass in real-world contexts, whether that means finding language to name systemic barriers or building on strong foundations to deepen resilience and trust. In addition, there are reflection prompts that individuals, teams, mentors, or supervisors can use to spark dialogue. These are designed to make it easier to talk openly about sustainability, confidence, and belonging without stigma. Ultimately, the framework is meant to be flexible. It can be used for self reflection, in peer groups, in mentoring or coaching relationships, or in professional development conversations. Across all of these contexts, its purpose is the same: to validate the human work of preservation and give people practical ways to navigate uncertainty together. So, what does this framework actually offer? First, it validates the human work of preservation, the advocacy, the emotional resilience, the hidden labor that often goes unrecognized. By naming those aspects explicitly, it helps practitioners feel seen, and it gives organizations a way to acknowledge that this work is part of digital stewardship. Second, it normalizes uncertainty. The reality is that digital preservation always involves changing conditions, imperfect environments, and limited resources. The compass language is meant to remind people that being adrift or run aground is not failure, it's part of the journey. Third, it encourages good enough pathways forward. Instead of demanding a leap to perfection, the framework supports incremental steps that are realistic and sustainable. And finally, it gives practitioners and organizations a vocabulary for articulating needs that go beyond infrastructure. It helps explain why staff support, belonging, and institutional validation are not just nice to haves, but essential for long term sustainability. So, why does this matter to the field as a whole? Because assessment isn't neutral. The way that we assess digital preservation shapes what organizations prioritize, how practitioners feel about their work, and whether people stay in this field. If we ignore the human dimensions, we risk perpetuating burnout and attrition. Practitioners already report unrealistic workloads, fragmented roles, and the burden of constant advocacy. A purely technical lens only amplifies those pressures. By contrast, people centered approaches strengthen sustainability. They help practitioners feel supported, recognized, and connected. And they remind us that trust and care are not just soft factors, they're infrastructure too. Without them, even the strongest technical systems will falter. This is why centering people in assessment isn't just an add on, it's fundamental to making digital preservation work last. And this project was a true team effort. I want to recognize my fellow co-leads and advisors, Jamie Schumacher, Jay Gattuso, and Francis Harrell, as well as our incredible cohort mentors, Danielle Taylor, Kyle Hink, Carol Kussman, Sam Meister, Alexis Braun-Marks, and Nick Krabenhoft. We were also fortunate to work with our evaluator, Stephanie Girding, and to have additional support from advisors and guest speakers who enriched the program. None of this work could have happened without their generosity, wisdom, and care. And of course, I want to thank the participants themselves. Across 2 phases and 6 cohorts, we had 36 practitioners from a wide range of institutions: libraries, archives, museums, tribal organizations, community archives, and universities. This diverse group of institutions made the conversations incredibly rich because people were coming at digital preservation from very different angles, but because they were united by the same challenges of limited resources and hidden labor. These participants brought honesty, vulnerability, and courage to the program. Their willingness to share challenges and celebrate incremental wins is what made this project meaningful. And I like to think of this as making landfall after a long voyage. These outputs, the white paper, the case study volume, and the navigating uncertainty framework are touchstones you can return to. They're ports of call where you can refuel, take stock, and find companions for your own journey in digital preservation. When we talk about digital preservation, it's easy to focus on the tools, the storage systems, the workflows, the audits. But the truth is, those tools are only as strong as the people who use them. Navigating Uncertainty Framework uses the metaphor of a compass for a reason. Digital preservation can feel like being lost at sea, uncertain conditions, shifting priorities, and no single map to follow. Tools can help you keep the ship afloat, but it's trust that helps you steer. Trust in yourself, in your colleagues, and in your larger community. If we can embed that trust into our assessment practices, if we can honor care, connection, and human sustainability alongside infrastructure, then we're not just preserving bits. We're building conditions where the work and the people doing it can truly last. And that's what it means to move from tools to trust. Thanks for tuning in, and please feel free to reach out with any questions about the white paper or framework to me at stacyandjones@arizona.edu.